Hello and welcome to the Media Mongrel channel. So, Keir Starmer is on his way out. Angela Rayner is plotting against him. Angela Rayner of all people. Oh God. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Well, it can't get much colder than this. In addition, Tim Sweeney, his right-hand man, has resigned. There are votes of no confidence apparently, much grumbling behind the scenes, and Keir Starmer is shedding allies like there's no tomorrow. Yep, things aren't looking good. Things are looking extremely bad. This young, fresh-faced Keir Starmer, full of bright ideas for the future, progressive, wants to strip away the trappings of jury trials so that the British public can be more at home having those trials. Well, who knew that decades later, under his leadership, they'd be stripping away your right to have trials. And this brings me to the that was then, this is now. I've said many times now that I think that Keir Starmer is a captured political individual, governing on behalf of somebody else, another person or organisation. Who could that be, I hear you ask? Well, frankly, everything is on the table. The Fabian Society, Mossad, the Russians? No, not really the Russians. It's more likely to be somebody like Mossad. They have their fingers in pretty much every pie across the planet, it seems. And after infiltrating or outright governing various organisations like the Fabian Society, potentially, maybe, allegedly, and powerful entities like BlackRock, amongst many others, led by various people like George Soros, the Kochs, who wield power indiscriminately, and it seems over the lower tier that may in fact include people like Bill Gates and many others who've appeared in the Epstein files. If I'm being very frank with you, I can't quite believe that Keir Starmer hasn't been named in the Epstein files. But that begs another question. Neither have any of the other European leaders. Or, for that matter, Canada or Australia. Wouldn't you think at least one of them would be in the Epstein files? They're, after all, men of power, and men of power seem inexorably drawn to individuals like Jeremy Epstein. And yet, curiously, the European leaders who are currently laying waste to the freedoms and liberties of Europeans are conspicuous in the files by their very absence. Individuals at the head of this experiment, like Ursula von der Leyen and Klaus Schwab, must be acutely aware at this point that the wheels are coming off. And maybe that's why Britain was chosen to introduce a series of hasty and unpopular decisions. Everything from 20-mile-an-hour speed limits to 15-minute cities, stripping away of rights to trial, as I've already mentioned. And the list goes on. Don't get me started on the Online Safety Act. But Keir Starmer, the charmer, the harmer, is trying desperately, as things fall apart around him, to serve two masters. On the one hand, he's trying to be the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and on the other hand, he's trying to be something other. The heavy hand of Europe, trying desperately to get everything that they need to get done in record time. But the problem is, it's too much, too soon. And this heavy-handed approach to rolling out, frankly, unpopular strategies is starting to look more and more like George Orwell's 1984. Keir Starmer is undoubtedly somebody's political lackey. He is not and never was leadership material. He was inserted into the Labour Party in a position of power, but it wasn't going well. So they get Jeremy Corbyn involved, who didn't want the job, frankly. And guess what? Labour explodes because of Jeremy Corbyn. This was a calculated move. Keir Starmer and the people behind him knew this was going to work. And when it did work, the die was set. The cuckoos were already in the nest, and Jeremy Corbyn was going to get pushed out one way or another. And now, a few years later, we find ourselves here. with a liberal Labour left smelling more like a turd than ever before. And the question here isn't really the demise of Keir Starmer, it's who's going to replace him. Labour will limp along, terminal in its existence, under somebody else, be it Calamity Lammy, Wedge Streeting, or some other no-count politician who sits on the front bench of the Liberal left political party. If you've gone to all this time and effort to install Keir Starmer, you know that things might get rough, and so there must be a plan B, a plan C, D, and even E. The rules for the game that's being played here have already been thought out many years ahead. We can only hope to dismantle Labour with the various local elections that are going to be happening. But the system is set up in such a way to allow the incumbent party to, as I say, limp on, to stagger around, lurching from one disaster to another, setting fires to everything as it rolls around in its final death throes. And who pays? Well, the British people pay. Liberal left Labour sandbagged the British public, just like the Tories had done years prior. This idea of a uni-party in British politics is looking more and more realistic. The only course of action here is a disruptor, a spoiler, and that brings us to Nigel Farage. But Nigel Farage is, as I've said previously, weak sauce. He's more establishment than you know. He's being lined up, in my opinion, to tinker around the edges of the problem for the next 5 years, assuming reform get in, so that the problem, as far as the British citizen sees it, can continue. So that the great European experiment can be born here in the UK. After all, if you're the leader of France, Germany, or any other WEF-controlled government, then Britain, What a scalp to get. No, we need a true disruptor, a real maverick, somebody who will dismantle everything that Europe has been building over the last few decades and do it quietly and with dignity. And that kind of power comes in an open shirt, an unbuttoned suit jacket, grey hair and a grey beard that looks as though it's been shaved down to a number 4, top and bottom. Yes, I give you Jeremy Corbyn. In a world full of muddled politics, terrible politicians with terrifying outcomes, your party still remains the best bet for snatching political normality from the jaws of political madness that we currently find ourselves trapped within. So, could you support Jeremy Corbyn? Because if you can't, as unpalatable as it is to say it, you're part of the problem, not the solution. Do let me know what you think in the comments below. Do like, subscribe and share if you'd like. It really would help the channel. And until next time, do look after yourselves.